These last couple days at school have been really interesting. We pretty much spent the entire week going over syllabus and just codes of conduct for class and how to respect one another and create space and an atmosphere for not only critical thinking but for respect. However, I have found, I think I mentioned this in my last video too, I have found some things to be contradictory, and reading this book, it's Practical Wisdom for Critical Thinking by Bell Hooks. And I mean, it's a guide for teachers or professors. However, I feel like I can definitely use those same tools like as a student and how I conduct myself when I'm in incredibly diverse spaces, or really just in any space where a dialogue is happening and there are just diverse perspectives. I brought up something to my professor. I'm gonna pull up this, they're like guidelines, and I feel like they're off to a pretty good start. They're class agreements, and these agreements are supposed to offer students a realm of possibility. So the first one is accept and interrogate any discomfort with compassion, speak explicitly with a race, gender, class privilege forward lens, give Black, Indigenous, folks of color, queer identities, neurodivergent, differently abled people time and space to speak before a dominant identity voice leads. And the final one is focus on impact rather than intent. So I learned these past couple years to definitely focus on impact rather than intent, because even if you are aiming to be intentionally respectful, or maybe you're being a little haphazard with your actions or your words, or maybe you're just unconscious about it and you haven't been made aware, it is definitely imperative to take accountability for when something has impacted someone else. My only offering to the final one was to differentiate, especially in the classroom when we're talking about different types of like cultures or race and the politics of and related to race and the constructs of whiteness. I have been in multiple class settings where specifically white women cry. And it's typically like during critique or like when the conversation, there's information presented. And I brought up to my professor, I said, I appreciate the focus on impact rather than intent. However, I have to make clear, especially when it relates to like my work and just how I communicate during classroom settings, that I feel like it's not my duty but the professor's duty to take note of what type of impact the other person is feeling. Is the impact guilt or shame, or is the impact someone who is like offended or feels like harmed? But also the word like using harm as it relates to other students in the classroom, I also mention, but also have to recognize like sometimes someone may feel harmed because they have not ever been put in a position to take accountability for their actions of projecting and perpetuating whiteness, for example, white tears. And I just had to make that very clear in class that is the professor's duty to differentiate what type of impact is happening and what type of harm, and whether or not those tears need to be acknowledged in the classroom. Because what happens is someone cries and now the focus is on the crying person, and we never return back to the actual topic. We never return back to the conversation. We never return back to the seriousness of the effects of whatever it is that we're reading or talking about, or just acknowledging that everyone has a unique perspective, and that in a classroom we should honor radical difference while understanding that despite there being differences and despite there being moments of like high tension, high emotions, and high just, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not gonna say animated, but just like strong feelings, that all of that is okay in the space. But what tends to happen is if you're flamboyant with your emotions, it's almost like bring it down, because now you're being a distraction. But I'd argue that in the same moment where there are perceivable positive reactions or commentary, there should also be space for the negative. There should also be space for like both ends of the spectrum of how people decide to express themselves, especially if you are a person who navigates spaces of blackness or are black. And I'm realizing this semester, I have a couple semesters left, that I feel like I'm a little bit more quiet, and I don't know if my quietness is coming from consistently being shut down passive aggressively, or if I'm being quiet to observe more so that I could make better and more informed articulations of what I'm thinking, while simultaneously projecting everything that I want to say in my artwork. So this will be an experience for sure, but I definitely wanted to share that with you guys. I meet different types of students, and typically like ones that are black, sometimes they'll come up to me and ask like, what has my experience been? And I always share with them to be great, not only to be great, but when you're in critique, take all the technical criticism and apply it. Like, take heed, especially if you plan on mimicking those same works or recreating those works. If you're exploring something new and you feel like, oh, like I'm really interested in this, I still want to continue on to do this. I feel like the technical critique that professors or students are offering, take heed of that, but content-wise, maintain your content. Because if you have a relatively strong voice, or it's subjectively strong, or you have like strong opinions about something, passively, words will be said, or people will maneuver around you in a way that will cause you to feel like you should change your content in order to maintain some type of like peace within your cohort.
BFFR. What did that spell? Be fucking for real.
I'd say, and I highly recommend to not do that. I've also had professors tell me like, oh, just make the work, essentially like make safe work here, because you're going to be out of here soon. And if you pursue an MFA program, if you do a residencies or nothing at all, but just make work at home, like you could do it there. So make safe work here and then do what you want to do when you graduate. For all this amount of tuition that people are paying, those are not recommendations that I would make. I'd also argue that like that means that professors have become apathetic, or maybe they have just seen a continuous cycle and have not like pushed up against it. Instead, you're telling students to, like make safe work. When you graduate, do whatever you want to do. If someone asks me, I tell them to make exactly the work that you want to make, and take that technical criticism, take all those thoughts and subjectivities about like how you can advance the quality of your work, take those and then maintain that content so that you become stronger within the institution that you're in. Not only that you're in, but like also paying thousands of dollars for it every single year. That's like one of the key takeaways I feel, because no one says that to any other student. The Black experience in America, or the Black the Black possibility in America is much too infinite to really narrow down. So when you are doing something that hasn't been seen before in institutions like this, or in predominantly white spaces or white adjacent spaces, because you do not have to be white to be white adjacent. You could just be a person who is not Black, who can benefit from whiteness. So you practice it, and can be practiced in many ways, but that's a topic for a different day. I forgot what I was talking about, but you get the picture. Make the shit you want to make, and don't let these people talk you out of it.